Welcome to CoachesCorner.health. Today we're going to be talking about what it means to feel overwhelmed, and we'll touch on what it's like as a woman in the corporate world pursuing a career, and how overwhelm can really affect her. And we're going to be pulling from some personal experiences in my life as I can totally relate. So please join us in today's discussion as we dive into what leads to overwhelm, why do we feel overwhelmed, what does overwhelm even feel like? And most importantly, what can we do about it? Hi, I'm Leslie Gadet, self-care specialist for female entrepreneurs and professionals who need to incorporate more self-care into their life and business so that they stay sharp, focused, and wake up with more energy and intention to tackle their daily activities with confidence. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you for that. I love your introductions. Hello, everybody. I'm Andy Lidstone, the unconditional coach. I help people set boundaries. I help people with boundaries that invite closer relationships rather than push people away. And I help a lot of people who have some version of control issues, either themselves or they feel like they're being controlled by someone else. So those are the kinds of things that we do. And I'm really excited about our discussion today about overwhelm, especially for someone who's in the corporate world. Let's get started. So tell me a little bit about your experience with that.
Yes. So for the past 4 decades, yes, I am dating myself, but I want to be able to share with the audience so that they can see that I really truly relate. I have been working in the world of law I started out as a legal assistant and then moved into the paralegal role. And as I found when I was younger, I loved the hustle and grind, the chase to learn more, of course, the chase for more money. But I soon found that with more money came more responsibility, which meant more of my time was being taken away. As well as I also found that as the corporate world started to change and how the employers started to look at how they could streamline some of their employees' job or roles for their position in the firm, that there was more doubling up of doing more than the original job description. And
Right.
so for me, that overwhelm started to really build up, especially when there was more responsibility and there was the same amount of time and you were trying to see what could you fit in. How were you to learn how to prioritize when everything seemed to be a rush? So my experience with overwhelm really led me to start thinking about more of like what is there to life, like is there more to life than what I'm doing? Because although I did enjoy it, and I still do, because my foot is still in the door, but in a different capacity. I
Right.
am my own boss now, but I found that when I was in a corporate environment where my day was structured, the time, what my duties were, like, when to go to work, when to leave work, when I could take lunch, what my job description was. I found that when I was able to start taking back that aspect of it and become my own boss, it really helped with the overwhelm. But when I was in it, it was really, really scary. It was, when I say scary, I mean, I thought, if this is all there is to life, I don't like it anymore. And
Right.
so that was partly how I was, overwhelm was really starting to take a toll on myself and on my marriage at the time.
Right. Right. And I like that you're mentioning that it was all about the chase for learning, the chase for money, the chase to do more, the chase to get better. That whatever the chase is, we might be chasing promotions, we might be chasing, better opportunities. There's all kinds of things we can chase, and oftentimes that's one of the things that leads to overwhelm is the idea that we don't have enough, the idea that we want more, whether it's more money or whether it's a better position or whether it's, you know, um, whatever it is, whether it's more learning or more knowledge or more skills or more, more employee in a is that we're chasing. So it sometimes that's what leads to overwhelm, is wanting more of something, and it's an interesting dynamic because in that case, it could be ourselves that's creating it. Like it could be us who's creating our overwhelm. It's possible that what we're feeling isn't necessarily coming from our job or our boss or outside of us. It could be something that we're seeking, we're creating more of. And that's the things that I've discovered in myself when I felt overwhelmed, but also in helping many of my clients over the years is when we feel overwhelmed, oftentimes it's because we're searching for something that we believe we want over whatever it is we have already, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, expand on that a little bit. What was it you felt that you wanted more of? You mentioned money, you managed learning, especially early on in your career you were talking about. But talk a little bit more about your experiences with it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So initially, in the very beginning, when I first got into law, I was working. This was way back in the early '80s. So yeah, we're talking a long time ago. And so in the beginning, there wasn't the computer wasn't really being used in smaller firms. There was a lot of the older ways of doing business, you know, faxes, using actual couriers who would, not like FedEx and UPS or DHL, but actual, you know, couriers or taxis to move things around. That was part of, like, you know, the older way of doing things, because, you know, technology hadn't caught up yet. And then I started recognizing that there was newness happening out there. Like, I started hearing about, I knew that people were starting to incorporate into the company's computer software, like using that to do their work. You know, I was still working using an electric typewriter at the time. And so, you know, I knew that at some point I didn't want to get left behind. I wanted to learn about this new technology being used in the firms and how they were using it. And the only way to do that was to leave the position that I'd been working with for 7 years with the first attorney that I had started working for, and go and work in a different environment. So I ended up leaving him, and partly because there was a little bit of overwhelm. I felt he was very busy, and I had taken on a particular department, the loan department, where I was really you know, doing all of the loans, creating all of the, you know, people would come in and just like do refinances, not purchases, but refinances. And, you know, for me, it was very busy. I was good at it, but it became overwhelming with the amount of work that I was doing, and I was working a lot of hours. And I was still in my early 20s. And so that was like, oh, okay, this is starting to get to me now. So, and ended up having my very first panic attack. And so I ended up then leaving and moving on to another firm. And I found that with this firm, it felt a little bit, I had more breathing room. I had a little bit more responsibility in the sense that I could actually make my own hours. I could decide, you know, when I was going to work. But I also found that they still were not as, they were not, they were not embracing this new technology the way I had been hearing about. Like, I knew it was out there. And so I decided to go to a larger firm. That was my first time to actually step out, going from a small boutique firm to a larger firm. And when I say larger firm, I'm talking about, you know, at least 100 plus lawyers in the firm. So I ended up going to work for this company, and they had computers, and I was learning about technology that way, and it was exciting and it was new, and I enjoyed that experience. What I found was I was chasing after better as well, because in the experience of working with this firm, I found that they were not as, I guess, as concerned about the quality, I should say, I guess. When things would break down, as an example, I would find myself having to walk further distances in the office to go to get my printed documents. And so I found that they were not embracing efficiency the way I wanted. So a friend of
Right.
mine had moved on to another large firm, and I decided, well, this is the time to decide what else could I do? What else? How could I now start really getting better? Go to places where they're embracing that. And that is when I went to one of the biggest law firms in Canada. And uh, I actually ended up sending my resume. And for 2 weeks, I ended up calling them like every few days, and finally got an
Mhm.
interview and finally got hired. That was how I would go after things. And I found that was really good because, again, that's the chase was good because I was learning. I was chasing after learning.
Mhm.
The over and it was great because I didn't there was a system in place that actually supported the busyness of a desk. You had
Right.
a support team. There was a secretarial pool that would do overflow work. The team, we had team leaders, we had teams of legal assistants. At the time I was a legal assistant, and we worked together.
Right.
And we would, if someone needed help, if someone wasn't busy, someone needed help, we would then help out each other. The That was great. That was my first real uh, enjoyment. But as I found moving, the reason why I moved a lot actually over the last 40 years of being in law is that my husband and we decided we were going to go and live in places that made us happy. In other words, we wanted to live our life, be happy now, and live our life the way that we chose to live. And so we would move to different places, which then took me outside of that structure and going into other companies where maybe sometimes the structure wasn't there. And I started noticing that a lot of the firms over the next, you know, 3 decades really started to double up the work. So the job description became more than what was originally expressed when you were in the hiring process. And that's where the overwhelm really started to begin. And that's where I started to now feel like the chase was, I'm not really enjoying the chase. I don't really want to
Mhm.
work this hard. I love doing my job and doing my job well, but having that extra added pressure of more, I didn't know how to handle it at first, so it was really really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that originally when you were feeling, you know, you loved the chase. You loved the idea of learning new stuff. You were
Mhm.
switching companies and switching jobs specifically to learn new things and to get new experiences and be in new environments, from small boutique law firms to the really large ones, like you said. Eventually, you got to. Um, I love the reasons you chose, and I also like that you mentioned a couple of times that that sometimes that led to that you were feeling that you didn't get what you wanted, or you weren't achieving what you wanted. Sometimes they weren't efficient, or sometimes they weren't embracing technology, or sometimes they weren't you know um, respecting their employees the way you wanted them to, or the way you thought they should. That's all relevant, because that all leads to a version of overwhelm, right? That's where overwhelm comes from, is we are expecting more than we can achieve, or what we believe we can achieve. And and later on in your career, that overwhelm came from your employer, less than inside of you. And that's the kind of the second place the overwhelm comes from. Is it comes from something outside of us, from someone or something outside of us, some sort of an expectation that's put upon us, that we either meet or fail to meet, right?
Mhm.
And when we're feeling overwhelmed from an external source, often we lose sight of our options. We lose sight of the idea that we can succumb to that overwhelm, or we have the option um, to move on, to do something different, to find a different employer or find a different situation, whatever the thing is causing overwhelm, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes when we're feeling it, we're lost in the feeling of overwhelm, which is part of what overwhelm comes from. Is it literally overwhelms our experience so that we feel little else or think of little else. And what we feel and think of, even when we're not working, is the overwhelm we feel at work or whatever the situation happens to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, by the very definition of being overwhelmed, we lose track of what our options are, what we can do about it. And sometimes it does take an outside voice, like, your husband or a friend or a coworker, to say, look, here's your other options, to remind you, not of things you don't know, but of things you may not have been able to consider in the moment because of the overwhelm that you're feeling. And that's what we when we're feeling overwhelmed, from whether it's because we're chasing something or whether it's because somebody else is putting expectations on us. Oftentimes the overwhelm we feel prevents us from knowing what we do next, what we can show up to next, what our possibilities, what our options are, what's available to us. If, for example, when we're chasing knowledge, when we're chasing learning, as you were, your goal was to learn new things, but maybe we, forgot about that there might be other ways to do that. You could have gone to a new law firm, but maybe you could have kept at the law firm you were at and, taken some night classes or something, right? Or maybe there were some other options. And when we're feeling overwhelmed, now I'm not saying this was your situation, but I'm saying that somebody who feels overwhelmed in that situation might forget that they have other ways to get new learning, other ways to get new training. You can ask our colleagues, you can go to a different company, as you've done. And sometimes we forget that we can go to another company. Sometimes we forget that we can get another job, that we can go to a different place. Um, some people actually do go the night school route, and they do feel overwhelmed because they're trying to work their full-time jobs that is, way more hours than they anticipated, and try and take some learning so they can go to a different job. And now they're overwhelmed. They have no time, not only for their family, but for their personal life, for their own relaxation, their own self-care. Which is one of the reasons that I like what you do now, is because you teach people how to manage that. You help people to manage their time so that they can do the self-care and spend time with the family and get the things that they enjoy out of life. Um, and I like that. It's also an example of some of the later choices that you made when you and the husband wanted to live now and do the things you enjoy now. Um, that helps to manage overwhelm as well, is because you decided that working all the time wasn't worth um, sacrificing your life now so that you could have something later on in life. Let's have it now. Let's not wait for retirement. Let's do it now, when I want to, when I'm young enough to enjoy it, and still have the income to do what I want. Right. And I
Mm-hmm.
and I love that you've made that decision. I love that you help other people make those decisions. I also know, like most people, that you went through times of strife, times of conflict, times of, overwhelmed, like things that really um, forced you into making some of these choices that you've made, as far as, I got to find a different way. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how did you feel overwhelmed? What made you get into this lifestyle of managing your time and figuring out what it is you actually want. What triggered all that?
Yeah. So yeah, firstly, I guess for me, the overwhelm was, I think, probably the reason why I had my panic attack in the very first job that I had, and because I didn't know how to handle the pressure of so much of managing a particular department on my own. I was good at it, and I showed that I was capable, but I was still very young and I didn't understand it. When my husband and I started moving to different places, after we got married, 6 months later, we moved from Canada down to the US, down to Florida. And that was a whole different lifestyle because now I had I'd never worked in the US before, although I was born here. I grew
Yeah.
up in Canada, and when I finally came down to the States to work, I wasn't really sure how that would work, and I think, it took some growing pains to find my footing, but I eventually did. And I think the next foray into overwhelm for me became working with a title company. This is probably within the first year of being down in the States and working with American companies. And I ended up working for two lawyers with a title company, which they managed their firm was they did closings for residential closings, as well as they did some litigation work of their own, but for the most part their team that they hired was working doing the title company part of it, which was preparing documents. So that was my first foray into doing paralegal work without really having that degree. And I started drafting documents. They taught me how, and we started drafting documents, and uh, including the title documents that go with and title policies, whether they were performers or title policies, and closing letters, and all kinds of things like that. All that comes with residential closings. So I I found myself excited about that because it was new. So I was learning again because I always love to learn, and I found it exciting. But over time, there were some things that were happening within the firm, and over time, I had to I had a decision to make whether it was to stay feeling again another bout of overwhelm, if you will, because I was being asked for responsibilities that I at the time felt were unfair. And that was just so that they could start living a lifestyle which they wanted to live. And they
Right.
wanted to put specific responsibilities on me. And that's where I became very uncomfortable because I didn't feel confident enough to do it on my own. I felt I felt like I was questioning myself. I was second guessing my knowledge, and I was second guessing and not believing that I could do. So it's almost like I felt that little spark of imposter syndrome working in this environment, which led me to feel very overwhelmed. I was emotionally
Right.
overwhelmed with it. So I did end up leaving them for a couple of years, and I went to work for another firm where I did have the responsibility, which allowed me to actually lean on and embrace that I did know what I was doing.
Right.
What I did not, what ended up happening though, is that this same company came back a couple years into my working for this company in Fort Lauderdale, and we ended up having a great conversation, and they wanted me to come back to work for them, and I felt at the time that it was a good move. It was closer to home, and we ended up doing that, and it worked. It was great. But again, it started out again in a great environment, a great. They had partnered up with another lawyer. It was the business was really going well. They were able to arrange with this other lawyer having the lifestyle that they wanted, so they would take off a couple months in the summer and sail. This is one of the things they wanted to do. And when that partnership didn't work out, and of course the firm split in half, I went with them. And not long after, they wanted to broach that same topic again with me, and it didn't go well. And so we ended up again, because I was overwhelmed with that. I just didn't feel at that point. I felt the not so much, and not only was it overwhelmed that I felt, but I also felt like taking advantage of, because I felt like this putting this responsibility on me. And I truly believe that when you own a law firm, I think it's important that you have at least another attorney in the office if you're going to take that time, because
Right.
I can't answer specific legal questions for certain things. And so it was very overwhelming, and I ended up going to work with another company, which I loved. A lot of things happened. We were now entering to the time when we had the market crash back in 2007, 2008. And, again, that led me back to Canada. And, I'm trying to keep this as short as possible, but just to give you that broader sense of what I
Yeah.
went through is I did go and work in different firms in Canada. I did have a lot of ups and downs. I wasn't happy all the time in what I was doing. I really just couldn't find my footing and really love the work as much as I used to. And so when I finally was working in California, because that's where we ended up, I found that was where the break, the where you would call rock bottom moment came for me. Was I can't continue my life this way because my job was overwhelmingly taking over my time, which was not allowing for me to have time with my husband, doing fun things. It was all about work. I was always exhausted emotionally and mentally exhausted because it was a lot. I was doing a lot of mental work and drafting documents on a very tight turnaround, and it was really taxing. And I found that I had to break away from that somehow. And so that led me to the next thing. But I don't know if you want to move on to that yet, or if you wanted to talk about that.
Well, let's dig into what you've already shared first a little bit. The idea that you were feeling overwhelmed because of expectations that were put on you, and and that's important because a lot of the time, I'm going to say most of the time, that people feel overwhelmed, it's because our employers have, like you've said, changed the job description. They they bring in new duties, new responsibilities, new things that they want us to do. They add responsibilities that maybe weren't part of our job description. And in the case of the two of the lawyers that wanted to go sailing, they they wanted you to take the place of a lawyer. Not just training you didn't have as a paralegal, which you eventually had the training for that, but they also wanted you to take on the job of like their jobs of a lawyer, of giving legal advice, which is something that not only were you not trained to do, you just weren't willing to do it. Right. And so I like that, because a lot of the times that's what happens is we're given responsibility that maybe wasn't originally a part of the contract or wasn't originally a part of our agreement. And when we're feeling overwhelmed, we don't usually recognize that that's what's happening, because like I mentioned earlier, the whole point of overwhelm is it removes our capacity to understand what we're experiencing. It limits our ability to understand what's going on, right? The second time you were working for that firm, and they asked you to do the same thing again, you were less overwhelmed that time because you'd already experienced it once. You'd already had the experience of what your possibilities were, what your options were. So although you were upset, although there was some issues, you were able to deal with them a lot more immediately, a lot more quickly. Which again, that's the solution to overwhelm, is being able to deal with the situation. But overwhelm usually prevents the solution. That's the definition of overwhelm. I'm too focused on the problem that I can't see the possible solutions. And that's what overwhelm is about, right? So I like that you shared those experiences, and like you said, as you went through other, back to Canada and back again to the States, how you went through several different situations where where other employers would would cause situations like that where you would be overwhelmed. And then when you were back in California again, and you were touching on that a little bit about how you were just busy all the time and exhausted and you know working and working and working, and eventually the job took over your life where you weren't able to to have fun, to spend time with your husband, to do the things that you wanted to do. And I enjoy that you were able to share those experiences from your perspective. It really helps to understand what overwhelm looks like. So let's talk about that last little bit. How did you make the transition out of that? Like not I won't don't necessarily want all the details, but what did you what was the thought process? What was your intentions? Like what eventually you said you hit rock bottom, or the overwhelm version of rock bottom. What triggered you to make a change, and what kind of a change did you make?
Yeah, so I think I started recognizing how I was feeling. Like it really hit me hard. I was feeling trapped. I felt resentful because here I was working, like, I would get up at 5 every day, not because I wanted to, but because I had to, so that I could leave early enough to get to work to beat the traffic. Because if anyone knows California highways, they're brutal. And so there's always, that it took me a long time to drive a distance that should have been no longer than 30 minutes. And even that
Mhm.
really is a long time. But, it, I had to leave early enough so I could make it to work in a time frame that allowed for me to like get in, take a breather. I would, just get settled in. No phones were ringing. I could just kind of start my day almost like having like that me time before I start work. But over time, that wasn't enough to help me to stop feeling trapped, to stop feeling like that major overwhelmingly thinking that if this is all there is to life, I don't know, I can't go on like this. I was literally uh, you know, not doing it in person, like not really doing it, but feeling like I was banging my head against the wall because I didn't know what to do. I
Right,
wanted something more. In fact, I'd been thinking about wanting something more for 10 years, almost
right,
10 years by that time. But I didn't do anything about it because I didn't have any clue that there would be another way, or could even possibly be another way. And I didn't know that all I had to do was actually start looking, Googling what are women doing? What do women do when they want to make changes as far as career choice changes or doing something more that they loved? And I didn't start doing that until I hit that moment where I started asking myself. I mean, I wasn't sleeping well. And so I would wake up wee hours of the morning and just be thinking to myself, is there more to life than this? Because I hope so, because I can't take it anymore. And again, as I was saying, I was very resentful, partly because I felt my husband didn't have the same pressure because he didn't work the hours like I did.
right.
And so and then when I would come home, every time I would have a conversation with him, it was coming from this emotional place
Mhm.
rather than just having a conversation because I was so emotional about everything, not liking my life, and having no idea at all if I could, what I could do, and if I could make changes. Until, like as I said, that moment came to me and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but let's talk about this. We talked about one time years before where we would want to live. We thought about, do we want to stay in California? This was early on, or maybe Las Vegas, because we'd gone to Las Vegas. And Las Vegas isn't just the strip. I know a lot of people think, oh, that it's all nightlife, but there's a lot more to it. And
Yeah,
so we said, let's revisit this. We talked about it. I said, look, let's go back to that talk we had because I think I'm ready to make change. And we actually had a discussion like what that could look like if we decided to move without having a safety net for myself, because typically I would find a safety net, meaning I would look for work and try to secure interviews before going, or even secure a job before moving, which I've done several times. But this time we just said, look, what we're going to do is we're going to make it work no matter what. We'll figure it out. And so I took a week off in March of 2018, early 2018. We went to Las Vegas and we found a place to live. We got an apartment. We got a storage unit for some of our things. We had our new landlord set up our utilities to be in there by the time we would arrive. And I went back to work that following Monday, and I gave them 2 weeks notice.
Right.
And that was probably the scariest moment of my life, to actually say I'm leaving this job security, because I didn't have anything lined up for where I was going. I
Right.
just knew that the only thing that was going to save me was doing this act. It was like I had to jump off the bridge, literally, without knowing if there was a net to catch me.
Right.
And so, going into work, I knew that there was another plan. Obviously, I didn't just go in there without thinking that there was the possibility of doing something else. And that was going, saying, look, it's not that I want to leave working for the firm, but I definitely think that it would be great if we could find something for me to do online. And I told, the managing partner, I felt very confident that I could do pretty much everything, 90% of my job that I was currently doing, online. And then I proceeded to go around to he said he would think about it. And then, of course, I didn't just sit at my desk waiting for his decision. I went and talked to all of the key players, all of the key lawyers in the office that he relied on, looked up to, that to support his firm, the most senior of them. So I sat down with them and I told them my plan, what I had decided I'm doing, what I would like it to look like. I'd like to be able to support the firm. And then we decided, they talked with him, we got together and talked again, and then we came up with they said, like he said, well, what can you do? I came back with a list of all of these things that I could do. I gave that to them. We had another talk about it with myself and the other key lawyers in the office, and we created a position for me,
Mhm.
and it was based on what I said I could do for them while I'm online, and that was the contract. What I wrote up, that became the contract, and so we said, let's try it for 3 months. And so 2 weeks later, we moved to Las Vegas, and I proceeded to start working from home. And that was a little bit interesting at first, because I still had the employee mindset that I had to show up at a certain time, that I didn't really, I didn't feel confident that I owned my time, until the office manager said to me one day by email, you do know that you get to decide. Your time is your time now. You get to decide. And when she said that, I realized, yeah, you're right. And that was like a relief. In fact, my overwhelm went from like 100 down to maybe about a 70. A 30% drop was huge,
Yeah, it
because,
is.
I no longer felt like, oh, actually, yeah, my time is my time. So now what can I do? And that's when I really started to look outside and start doing things. But yeah, it was a relief, and that was the only, like I said, the only thing I could do was take back my time. And now I get to structure my time the way I want to. But it was huge and scary, as it was the scariest thing I had ever done, but it was the most needed. And I truly actually attribute it to saving my life, because I really didn't feel like I was going to have much of a life if I did not make something change.
Right. Right. And I think that's the key with overwhelm is you mentioned that you kind of hit that point in your life that if this is all there is to life, I don't want it. Right. Now, we don't necessarily directly attribute that to ending my life, but some people do.
Mhm.
Like some people do actually get to that point where if this is all there is to life, I literally want to stop living. Now, not everybody gets to that place, but I want to acknowledge those that do. Sometimes overwhelm takes us right to that extreme limit, and so I want to help people understand that you, our audience, there is no rock bottom that will make you change. There's no one situation that will make you change. It's what does your circumstances look like? What does your tolerance level look like? What are you willing and even able to put up with before you hit that rock bottom, before you decide this is enough? And you'll decide this is enough. You'll know that it's rock bottom when you literally feel like I'm going to die, either because I'm going to do it myself or because I'm going to have a heart attack, or I'm going to, some health thing is going to go wrong, or something's going to happen. My life is on the line here. And that's what rock bottom feels like. And overwhelm can get us there. And when you hit that, that's when you can start to realize something needs to change. And a lot of us, when we hit that space of something needs to change, we're not able to even give our job the thing that the level of energy or quality that we originally wanted to. We weren't able to even the thing that we've committed our life to. We're not able to give it that anymore. And when we come to that realization, we start to maybe take a little office time and look for what are my options. Or on my lunch break, instead of having lunch, I'll do a Google search. What do women in this situation do? Or maybe I'll have 5 minutes between meetings, and I'll sit down and call up a colleague and say, I know you felt like this a few years ago. What did you do? We'll start taking a little bit of that time we were giving to our company, and we'll use it for our own solution. Whether that's doing a Google search and you actually using company resources to find a solution, or whether that's calling up a friend or a family member or even a colleague and saying, what did you do? Sometimes it is only 5-minute conversations, and sometimes I've known other people who've taken, an hour of company time and just tried to figure out a solution of their own, where they would literally stop doing their job for an hour and do something else to try and figure out a solution. When that's what's happening, something has to change. And if you are either taking company time to do that, or worse yet, you're taking your what's left of your personal time, like the time you should be sleeping in the middle of the night, the time you should be spending with your family, your husband, yourself, when you stop going to the gym, or stop doing the things that you need to do to be healthy. When you start taking up that time to find a solution, that's when it's time to really commit to a solution. Because by the time you get overwhelmed to that level, you're already stealing time from either your job or your family or your personal health. And if you're stealing time from those things, you better get some benefit out of it, because you're going to hurt all of those other things in your life at some point. I've known people who've gotten fired because they were so overwhelmed they didn't know how to handle it. They were taking company time to try and find a solution, and they got fired because they took a few minutes here and there. Right? I've had clients who lost relationships because they were so overwhelmed in their job that they didn't know how to find a solution. So they were using their quality time with their husband or their wife to try and find a solution. And this is the critical time when it is to find a solution. And if that's where you're going, first of all, make sure you can find a solution. Second of all, if you can't find a solution yourself, reach out to somebody. As I mentioned before, and as you've talked about, overwhelm is the very idea that I don't know what else to do. I didn't know what else I could do. I didn't know what other solutions I had. I didn't know what other options I had. So oftentimes it helps to have an outside perspective, somebody who isn't you, who can help you see what your solutions are. And if that person is somebody who's also trained and experienced in helping people in your situation, the way you are, Leslie, then that person can optimize that time. Not only can they offer you, better solutions or different solutions and help you see your options, but they can do so in a quick and efficient way so that you're not using any more time than you have to. So that you're not sitting there for another 10 years feeling overwhelmed while you're talking to family members trying to figure out a solution, while you're talking to your best friend who's in the same situation trying to figure out a solution. Talk to somebody who can, I mean, yes, those things help. Sometimes reaching out to family and friends does help. If that also doesn't help, then that's when it's time to reach out to somebody who's trained and experienced in doing these kinds of things. Um, the the best solution for overwhelm is an outside perspective, somebody who isn't you, somebody who isn't going through what you're going through. And the best version of that is somebody who's been through it before and knows how to walk you through it. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, this would be my advice to our audience. When we feel overwhelmed, find someone you can trust to help you deal with the overwhelm, and not just listen, not just hear you, not just be a good ear or a shoulder to cry on, but also someone who can help you see what your options are. And it's important, and I want to bring this up too. It's important to know the difference, because when we're feeling overwhelmed, there's also a whole plethora of other information that's coming, other emotions that are coming along with that. So it's also important to have somebody that can listen to you, that you can just literally just cry on their shoulder, or they vent to them, or or they can hear whatever's going on. They might not offer a solution, but you do need to get those emotions out and express them to somebody. And then maybe that person is also the person who can help you with the solution, but maybe they're not. Sometimes we need two separate people or several separate people that we can express our emotions to, and then others that can help us to find solutions. Again, you're not stuck in a box here. You can find options for your solutions. But the best way to find those, if you're having a trouble finding them on your own, if you take a few minutes here and there and look for a solution and you don't find anything right away, find somebody who can help you get your solution. The biggest symptoms of overwhelm is it limits our ability to find a solution, right? And if you're so the easiest way to find a solution is to find somebody who has that mental energy, that space available to do some of the thinking that you're not able to do on your own, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and also too, what I found in my experience when I was at that breaking point was, no matter what, everything around me just didn't feel great. Like you even talked about, health wise, I didn't feel good. And it was starting to take a toll on me, not only emotionally, but physically. Like I wasn't sleeping well. So, of course, that was also taking a toll on me mentally. And so it really does, it's important to start not to ignore the signs of it, because again, asking for help, I know, can be probably one of the hardest things, but I've found for myself, and I don't know if if you can do this, it would be great, is especially in an employer situation, is just being open and honest. I feel a lot of people would prefer that you be open and honest. And it's not about you're telling them your life story and going into full details, but if you're just saying, like, I need to this, I'm going through some stuff, and whether, or if you feel like your job description, don't sit there and allow yourself to go through and think that only you have to do it and only you can do this.
Right.
Ask your work colleagues how to help you prioritize your work, or maybe delegating it out, helping each other to get the job done. Because again, when it comes to a job to a work environment, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about we. So the entire firm benefits, or the entire office benefits, when you are working at your best potential, but when you're all
Yes.
working together at your best potential. It's not about like trying to
Yeah.
outshine each other. It's about how can I, if my I see my work colleagues struggling, and this also goes for you if you are in a situation where you see a work colleague struggling, is to not leave them there in that struggle pit, because they really could use your help to help them get out of that. Help them to, maybe there is some overwhelm, and maybe they're afraid to ask for help, and maybe they feel like asking for help to do a certain part of their job makes them look like they're not good enough for the job. So, don't allow them to sit there in that place, because it really doesn't benefit it doesn't benefit them, number one, but it doesn't benefit you either, because then you have somebody in the office who's not really pulling their weight the way they would like to, but they're
Right.
feeling overwhelmed by whatever their situation is. So, so it's just recognizing, paying attention to people. And, I think kindness goes a long way. And it's not about, worrying about your job, someone coming for your job. It's about really making time for that person to say, hey, we're in this together, because it is a team.
Yeah.
And that is probably one of the biggest takeaways, if I could impart, is to make sure that you are acting as a team. So when they say, are you a team player, that's what it means. It's not just about doing work together, or uh, you know doing your job well. It's about making sure that the people in your who you work with, that they're all doing their jobs well, and they're all feeling good about it, so that you have a
Yeah.
great environment. It's paying
Yeah.
attention to those signs.
Yeah. Yeah. And feeling good about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the critical part. I think a lot of us focus on is the rest of my team doing their job, but
Mm-hmm.
we forget to focus on, are they feeling good about it?
Mm-hmm.
Are they enjoying doing their job? Are they enabled to do their job? Are they empowered to do their job? Do they feel able to do their job? Do they feel like they can do their job? Do they enjoy doing it? Those are the feelings. It's not so much are they doing the job, but are they feeling like they can do the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And back to the overwhelm question too. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, what's the problem? Like, what's the problem? The problem is that I don't see a solution, or the person who's feeling overwhelmed doesn't see a solution. So if you see somebody, back to what you were saying a second ago, if you see somebody in your office who doesn't feel like they can do their job, maybe they're the ones feeling overwhelmed, and you can step up to help. Because as we were talking about earlier, the solution to overwhelm is having outside help. When your office manager, when you went to move home and started working from home, and you were still doing, the regular hours, and your office manager called you up and said, or emailed you and said, you don't have to work those same hours. You have your own time. It took somebody outside of you to help you recognize that you have taken control of your time. You have that say now,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have that option now. Sure, we want you to put in X amount of hours, and sure, we want you to get X amount of things done, but you can do that when you decide to, right? You have some freedom as to how that happens. So sometimes it does take somebody outside of us to help us. And so that's where, to your point, keep an eye out on your team. Sometimes they need support that they won't ask for, can't ask for, don't know how to ask for, or don't feel able to ask for. And at the same time, if you're the one feeling overwhelmed, don't wait for somebody to offer help. Um, Sometimes they won't recognize it. Our culture is not built around helping each other as much as we think it should be, as much as we would like it to be. Um, a lot of corporate jobs are every person for themselves. Everybody do their own thing, dog eat dog, all that. So in those kinds of environments, don't wait for somebody to offer to help you. Reach out. Reach out to a colleague, reach out to your boss, reach out to your spouse, reach out to a friend or a family member. And if you can, reach out to somebody who can actually help you. If you don't know who that is, reach out to somebody who you trust and ask them, who can I reach out to that'll actually help me? Right? Keep reaching out until you find somebody who can give you what you're looking for. And reach out to a therapist or a life coach or somebody who is trained in helping people get through what we're going through. A therapist can help you deal with your emotions and the problems that are happening. A life coach can help you come up with a solution to it and go to the next level. Um, Figure out what it is you're looking for and reach out to get that. The secret to the solution here, as you have mentioned, as you have done, is to take the time it takes to find a solution Reach out to the people you need to. You noticed because your health was suffering, your relationship with your husband was suffering, your job was even suffering, and your mental health, your desire to even keep doing what you wanted to do, to keep living the life you were living, that was gone. Like you'd lost a lot. So, but you eventually decided, I'm going to take this solution on myself, as you had done so many other times in your career. I'm going to come up with a solution. I'm going to find a solution, and then I'm going to offer that solution to my employer. Which is like I said, which is something you've done several times before in your life. So these are the ways that we can reach out. These are the ways that we can figure out, find solutions. There's so many nuggets in your experiences that you've shared with us today. There's so much wisdom in what you've given us today, and I thank you for that. The path that you've taken is a great one, and you're still in the same career 40 years later, right? Not many people get to say that, because not many people have the resources to be that resilient. So I'm glad that you've shared that experience, because more of us want that. So thank you for that. Thank you, Leslie, for being vulnerable, for sharing that part of your life with us. It's been brilliant, and I look forward to hearing more of what your experiences are.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's again, for me, the whole transitioning for this series is hits close to home,
Yeah,
and I want to be able to share so that if you're feeling this way, if someone is feeling this way, or they're experiencing this, or that someone they know, that there are solutions, there are real things that they can do, but also to let them know that they're not alone. I think a lot of the time, even though we know we're not alone, we still feel like we're alone. And
yeah,
so that's partly why it's really important to not allow yourself to sit too much in that place by yourself, and just ask someone for help. Ask someone if you can sit down with them and pick their brain about something, or share something that you're going through, and that gets you started on the next phase of your life in a way that it gives you possibilities, opens up possibilities. So I've truly enjoyed sharing about my life. I am an open book pretty much, but I appreciate the call today. It's been really a great experience with you, Andy. As always, you've been leading this conversation today with the questions, and allowing me to just speak from the heart and share with our listeners. So thank you.
beautiful, beautiful. Wonderful, great conversation. Like you said, I also agree. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you to our audience, to those of you who've been paying attention, who've been watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. Please share this around. Let other people know what your experience was here, and if there was any nuggets that you think are useful to you or to someone else, then let other people know. And if you press that like button, if you tap that like button, it'll help YouTube figure out that there are other people who might want to know this too. So that's a way that you can help YouTube figure out who else might want to hear this information. So obviously subscribe if you want more of what you're hearing here, and we'll see you in our another episode. Thank you for the conversation, Leslie, and thank you, our audience, for staying with us today and enjoying this conversation. There's plenty more of these to come.
Yeah, wonderful. Yes, thank you, Andy. So we hope that you have an amazing rest of your weekend, a great week, and we'll see you next Saturday.
We'll see you next Saturday, everybody.